Hello everyone and welcome back to the damn sofa. That's the sofa along with my little doggy Roscoe, and my name is Paul. Now today what we're going to be doing, we're going to be continuing the discussion here on this channel about Orrin and Orson West, the two brothers. The case has been going on for a while and now we are finally getting some more answers as to what happened. Sadly, tragically, as a lot of us know by now if you're watching this, it does not sound like the boys are no longer with us. We don't have 100% details to that as of this filming, but it's one of those endings where it's clearly not what we wanted, right? We usually go into these situations hoping that at minimum they can be found alive, all that stuff, right? And so it's always disheartening when that happens. On the same note, it's also like, okay, we can start getting answers, we can start getting justice. Now, this video is going to be more of like a deep dive into some of the stuff that we know now, right? And so what I mean by that is just some of the information that's coming out. If you follow my other channels, you know yesterday early in the morning I posted a video that was basically like a quick update as to what we knew at that point. And then, I mean, literally y'all, within hours or whatever, it was like all this information came out. And so I wanted to just come over here to this channel where I do more deeper dives and stuff like that. So on that note, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Also check out my podcast channel, which is where I do like the quick updates, referencing articles, things of that nature, live chats. We'll be doing a live chat about this for sure, because I'm very interested to hear what y'all have to say about this. And then I also have a review channel, so check that out as well. Okay, so what I want to start off with is a clip from yesterday's press conference from the DA. Just a very quick clip to kind of just let us know the basic facts of the case and where it started.
On December 21st of 2020, Orrin was 4 years old and Orson was 3 years old. Their adoptive parents in California City, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, reported to the California City Police Department that the boys had disappeared from their backyard.
So that is the basis of what started this whole thing off, at least for the public, right? Because as we're seeing now, there is way more that went behind it. And we could sense that when this all came out. Now, also, what we're going to be doing in this video, and that statement that she just did, that kicked off a series of events. And one of those events was, and obviously searches, things of this nature, was the adoptive parents, Trezell and Jacqueline, giving an interview. So we didn't get good vibes from it then, and we certainly don't now, right? So towards the end of this video, I'm going to be breaking down that video and just going over some stuff because I've watched it. And I've actually gone back and started watching like other things, like with reporters talking to the police and stuff like that. But we're going to start off in this video with that interview and going back over it, because when I did, I'm not going to lie, my mouth was on the ground because I was just like, I cannot believe how cold-hearted these human beings are. First of all, because now we know that they knew exactly what they were doing. This was very calculated. This was very, like, they came up with the story, the whole 9 yards. And then we're ballsy enough to go public with it like this, right? I'm just like, oh my God. So anyways, we're going to break that down. Now, I always say this in these videos, and y'all know this by now if you've been here. I'm not a journalist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a cop, not any of this stuff, right? This is just me, my sofa, my dog, and my 2 cents worth of opinions on true crime. So let's circle back to that press conference very quickly. And I just want to talk about a couple of things that came out in that I was like, interesting. So as we know of now, both Jacqueline and Trezell, they have been arrested. They have been hit with several charges each. And we're going to talk about those in a minute. We're going to go over some of that. But one of the main key points from the press conference was them talking about the grand jury and all that kind of stuff. So this went on for like 3 months, right? Which I was happy to hear that because I was like, wow, they've really taken their time. They've really gone over things. Now, they did say in the press conference that over 50 witnesses were called in. Would love to know what they had to say and who it was. Because you can start piecing this together just from what we played out or what we saw play out, right? With neighbors, video footage, I mean, all this kind of stuff and the piecing together of the puzzle, right? And so what I'm getting at is it makes me feel confident of, okay, there has been a lot of work going on behind the scenes. They have dotted their I's and crossed their T's, because remember, at this point, the boys have not been found, which is another heartbreaking aspect to this. Hopefully that will happen along the way so that they can be given a proper, resting place somewhere. I hope that they have a shred of decency in them, and I'm referring to Jacqueline and Trezell, to give the biological family, and at this point, at the nation who is watching this case unfold, that benefit, but especially the biological family. I mean, it's just another slap in the face, for God's sakes. Anyways, I could go on for hours about that. So that dynamic at the press conference I found to be very interesting, and telling in that way that, okay, they've been putting the work in, they've been doing this, there's over 50 witnesses. Who are those witnesses? Were some of Trezell and Jacqueline's family, the grandmother, people like that, and we'll talk about her too. That kind of a dynamic. And obviously we'll see this play out during trial, but right now it's one of those things where my nosy self would just like to know. Now, another dynamic about this case that almost goes hand in hand with it is a reporter by the name of Bayan Wang. He has done an amazing job on this case. He has followed it from the get-go. He has interviewed people. He has asked hard-hitting questions. He has kept us informed all the way up till, with this, right? So if you're just following this case now and you want like firsthand information on it, that kind of thing, I'm putting his information down in the description below. So he recently appeared like last night on Court TV with Vinnie Palatine, and I want to talk about just a few things that he said in this interview, or this panel discussion or whatever. And I'm just going to refer to my notes over here. So one thing that they did in this is they revisited Bayan's interview with the chief of police, right? And I'm probably going to do an entirely separate video on that and look back over that and make commentary on it, because it was longer, and I'm not trying to make this like some 3-hour long video for you, right? It's probably going to be long enough as it is already, but that definitely is something I want to look back on just to kind of rake over the information. But what Bayan said last night that was interesting to me is when they revisited the part that the chief said they used dogs at the house, remember when the search was going on, but the dogs never picked up the scent of the kids. Now that was one of the first things that we were like, okay, because remember Trezell and Jacqueline's story is that the kids wandered outside the home and they're like, yeah, there's nothing. The dogs are saying that is a lie, right? Now the chief didn't say that in those words, but it was the first thing that we were like, well, that's weird, right? Okay. So another thing that was brought up in this is the last positive identification of the children. And at first, the chief's like, oh, well, it was by Jacqueline and Trezell the night of the situation. And Bayan goes further. He's like, well, not them, but somebody besides the, adopted parents. And the chief says it was the grandmother back in Bakersfield. And then Bayan's like, well, when was that date? And the chief is like, I'm not going to tell you. And I get that, I understand. So that leads me to another question. Is she going to be charged? Is she part of the crime? And when we go over the charges here in a second, we'll talk more about that dynamic with her, because other people were involved in this, and that's part of it. And so I'm just like, well, the timeline's not adding up, right? Because at this point we know that it's been like 3 months before the children, September 1st, I think, the 30th or the 21st, somewhere in there, is when they're saying that their lives were taken, right? So, this throws the whole timeline off. So that's going to be very interesting, because I do feel like we're going to see other people charged along the way, and it just hasn't happened yet. And it could have happened by the time you're watching this, so we just have to stay tuned. Okay, so let's go ahead and start moving into the discussion on some of the charges, things of that nature. Now, one thing I want to do is, again, I'm going to circle back to Bayan Wang. I want to go over his Facebook post that he did, because he introduced this in such a very nice way and laid it out. So I'm urging you to follow him on this case. So let's just go review his Facebook post about this, and then we'll get into the actual charges. And I'm going to put a little screenshot of his post over here, but we're going to read along. So here we go. An investigation reveals that toddler brothers Orson and Orrin West were deceased 3 months before their adoptive parents, Trezell and Jacqueline West, reported them missing in California City in December of 2020. Whoa, okay, major. According to Kern County District Attorney Cynthia Zimmer. The boys' bodies have not been found, which does not preclude prosecutors from pursuing murder charges, according to Zimmer, who has successfully prosecuted no body cases before. Zimmer was unable to disclose how the boys' lives were taken, but said circumstantial and direct evidence leads him to believe that the adoptive parents were taken into custody around 7 p.m. in western Kern County Tuesday. Okay, so pause for 1 second. One thing that I'm like, oh my God, I mean, hopefully at some point, and again, we're just going to see because this could be a bargaining chip with prosecutors and how all that works. Hopefully, they can get a proper burial is what I'm getting at, okay? Hopefully that will take place in this. I do feel confident that we're going to learn information that's like, oh, whoa. I feel confident that they can, I mean, obviously they charge them, right? So the fact that it's like, okay, we've done this before where there's not been a body present, I feel much better about this. Like, I think that they have their ducks in a row is what I'm getting at. Both are being charged with 2 counts of second-degree M charge, 2 counts of willful cruelty to a child, and 1 count of making a false report of emergency. If found guilty of these charges, the adoptive parents can face 30 years to life in prison. These are ones like this where I'm just like, I pray they stack them on top of each other, right? Because honestly, let's everybody have a damn day in court. I get that, right? But if everything goes through with this, I mean, please, just, I mean, there's absolutely no business walking the streets free after this. So let's continue. The case was presented to a grand jury over the course of 3 months. Okay, this is again why I'm just like, you know what? They are taking their time going through this, right? I mean, this was a major. This has been going on for a hot minute. Okay, they returned a true bill resulting in an indictment charging the adoptive parents with the crimes listed above. The DA sent me a copy of the indictment, which alleges that the brothers' lives were taken between September 1st and September 30th, 2020. This is around the time the adoptive parents moved from Bakersfield to California City. Okay, so that's very interesting to me because, again, if it's this window of time, and I don't have everything like locked down to a specific like, oh, well, this happened here and this happened here. You see what I'm saying? But it does make me wonder because so many of us were like, I don't know if the children were ever at the house. I mean, I just don't think they were. If they were, it happened very soon thereafter or during this transitional period, something of that nature, because I also think that part of this, and we're going to talk here momentarily, and we're going to break down a little interview thing that they did. But he was so cocky about everything. I just felt like in his world, Trezell, in his world, it was almost like I've erased any and all evidence in my mind to where I think we can sell this. We can get away with it, right? So let's continue. Let's see. This is around the time. Okay. The indictment alleges that the adoptive parents induced others to participate in the commission of the crime or occupied a position of leadership or dominance of other participants in its commission. We're going to talk in a second because that's major. Zimmer is unable to comment on whether others have been detained or arrested in this case. The indictment further alleges that planning was involved in the taking of Orson's life, stating that the manner the crime was carried out indicates planning, sophistication, or professionalism. So here is what to me sounds horrifying. So a few things real quick. Number one, I'm very curious to see if, I think it's his mother who said that she saw them recently, but now we're learning there's no way she could have, right? I mean, not alive at least. I wonder if anyone else is going to get a charge, like on that nature. I really wonder if they forced the other children to participate in this somehow. Whether it was lying, covering up, something of this nature. Because that comment where they say, induced others to participate in the commission of the crime or occupied a position of leadership or dominance of other participants in its commission. I mean, my God, like what if, my mind just goes to 100 different places, right? But then also, this is interesting, the indictment further alleges that planning was involved in Orson's taking his life. It almost makes me wonder this. Was one of them basically one of them was planned because they were the second person. Something took place where the first one, whatever, Trezell snapped, left him in a car. Who knows, right? I'm only speculating at this point. But then the other one, they had to, like, something deeper had to go in with that, right? I don't know. So I just wanted to read that because I'm kind of walking you through how I saw this all take place or whatever, through my day or whatever. So let's go ahead and move on into the next thing. Okay, so let's discuss some of these charges and just read over them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the indictment up here on the screen. Now, I'm not going to sit here and read through every single last one of them. I will put links down here to them or, to his pages where he has them listed if you want to read every last detail, because these are going to be listed as the same for each person on here. So I just don't want to bore you essentially with me just reading it out loud to you and being repetitive about it. But there are some things that I think are interesting that we're going to talk about. Now also, I might change some words around to not get this video messed up with YouTube or my channel in trouble. So if I say the big M charge, that's do the math on that one, right? So anyways, let's go ahead and let's start looking into it. And we're first going to look to count 1, Penal Code Section 187, the big M charge. Now, on or about September 1st, 2020 through September 30th, so I corrected myself from back there, Trezell West and Jacqueline West did with malice aforethought Orrin West, a human being, in violation of 187. It's second degree M charge. It's a felony, and it's further alleged that the above offense is a serious felony within the meaning of Penal Code 192.7. Okay, circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant Trezell West and Jacqueline West committed a crime that involved great violence, threat of bodily harm, or other acts disclosing a high degree of cruelty, viciousness, or callousness with the meaning of California Rules of Court 4.42. So I think that that's interesting, the aggravating factor or whatever. Clearly something went down here, and I'm going to talk about what I think took place or whatever, which is completely just my opinion. I do not have any evidence to this or whatever, but just after reading this, but we'll continue this for now. Okay, so circumstance and aggravating. It is an aggravation. It is further that the victim, Orrin West, was particularly vulnerable within the meaning of the California Rules of Court. I mean, these are little babies, for God's sakes, right? Okay, circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant Trezell and Jacqueline induced others to participate in the commission of the crime or occupied a position of leadership or dominance of other participants in its commission within the meaning of the California Rules of Court 4.42. Okay, so now this is what I was talking about earlier. And so this is where I'm just like, oh my God. Number one, are we going to find out that like the grandmother is going to get in trouble or other people? Or God help us all, did they have like their other kids help do something? Like maybe not intentionally, but almost like, okay, well, you go do blank, or, go clean this up, or something terrible, right? My mind goes all over with that, but clearly other people are involved and somehow they've, coerced that scenario to make that happen. So I shudder to think what we're going to find out about this charge. Okay, now let's continue. So, circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant Trezell West and Jacqueline West took advantage of a position of trust or confidence to commit the offense within the meaning of California Rules of Court 4.42. So again, and I ain't no lawyer, right? To me, it just sounds like, obviously, they were adoptive parents, right? So there's that right there. But it just sounds like they used their position, whether that be as a parent or some kind of manipulation or whatever. But again, I don't know, and I'm curious what y'all think or know from watching other channels, or if you're a lawyer or whatever, drop it in the comment section. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, count 2. Penal Code 187, the big M, on or about September 1st through September 30th, Trezell West and Jacqueline West did with malice aforethought Orson West, a human being, violation of the Penal Code 187. Let's go to the aggravating factors, and a lot of this stuff is going to be the same right here for each child. It's further alleged that the defendant Trezell West and Jacqueline West committed a crime that involved great violence, threat of great bodily harm, or other acts disclosing a high degree of cruelty, viciousness, or callousness within the meaning of California Rules of Court. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further that the victim, Orson West, was particularly vulnerable within the meaning of California Rules of Court 4.42. 1. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further alleged that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, induced others to participate in the commission of the crime or occupied a position of leadership or dominance of other participants in its commission within the meaning of California Rules of Court 4.421. Circumstance and aggravation. It is further that the defendant, Trezell West and Jacqueline West, that the manner the crime was carried out indicates planning, sophistication, or professionalism within the meaning of California Rules of Court 4.42. Okay, so now that's what's interesting to me. That is Orson. And then when we just read before, and let's see here, Orrin. So, here's the thing. So I want to pause there for a second, because this is one of the things that I'm sitting here thinking. And again, I'm very curious to hear y'all's thoughts on what you think took place, whatever. It makes me think that something happened to one of the brothers first. And then the other one was like a planned out, he was a witness, something of that nature, right? It was almost like, and I'm not going to say, I'm not trying to even give them props, but well, there was an accident at first and then they did this. I almost feel like they did something that resulted in the loss of life of one and then had to plan out the secondary one, if that makes sense. Now, I could be completely wrong, because again, these are both second degree charges. So that's where, I mean, again, I'm not sure how that plays out. But it's just very interesting to me that one of them has, and I'm going to read it again right here. Let's see here. Induce others. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing here. Plays out. Okay, I'm gonna read it one more time. It's further alleged the defendant Trezell West and Jacqueline West that the manner the crime was carried out indicates planning, sophistication, or professionalism within the meaning of California Rules of Court. So that part, I mean, that one has me really stumped, but it makes me think that, you know, this wasn't a total like, oh, whoops, the blank happened and we try to cover it up. You know, that kind of a thing. Now, obviously, we know, regardless if they try to cover up or whatever, that they concocted a huge story and cover-up scheme, right? I mean, we saw this play out and we're getting ready to, you know, review it here in real time, right? So there's that. Now, I'm just going to flip through very quickly to see if there's anything else I want to read about the cases. There are other charges here, and let's just go through here. Those are the two big ones, right? And let's see, count, where is it? Where's count 3? Okay, let's read these. Okay, count 3. On or about September 1st through September 30th, Trezell West and Jacqueline West did willfully harm or endanger Orrin West, a human being, in violation of Penal Code Section 273. So again, willfully harm or endanger. So this is again leading me to think that something took place, some event. I mean, we've already seen and heard that Trezell has like these anger issues. So what if he popped off, did something to the children? Remember how much he was trying to say, and again, I'll break it down in the interview thing. Oh, they like to wrestle, they like to tumble, they like to do this. Almost like he was setting up that they would have bruises and things of this nature on them, right? But again, it's weird because he knew they weren't going to find them at that point alive, at least. These are the thoughts my head goes through. Anyways, so let's go down to counts. Let's read the rest of the counts off. The circumstances that surround these are virtually the same for these last ones. That's why I'm going to just kind of stick to the counts here for you. So count 4 is between September 1st, September 30th. Trezell and Jacqueline did willfully harm or endanger Orson, a human being, in violation of Code 273. So they're each hit with that same charge. And then count 5, where is it? On or about September, or I'm sorry, I'm used to saying that. On or about December 21st, 2020, Trezell West and Jacqueline West did falsely report an emergency in violation of Penal Code 148.3, a misdemeanor. Now, this is the one that we all saw play out, right? I mean, they cooked up a huge one. And this is the thing. I mean, look at what all they did, right? I mean, they sat here and cooked up a huge story. Called, emergency people, had FBI, this, you name it. Look at how long this has gone on, y'all, that they have been like completely lying through their teeth, right? Now, before we get to like the end of the video where I'm going to totally put my thoughts out there now that I have been shy with them along the way, talk about things that have taken place today, that kind of a thing. I want to go ahead and break down the interview that they did, right? Because this is major, okay? This is major. I mean, that right there, I'm just like, oh my gosh. And like I said, I'm just going to focus on a certain segment of that. The way it's going to go is I'm going to display a clip and put my thoughts out there about it. And then we'll reconvene after around the sofa and discuss. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at that initial interview that we all saw, that we all felt many ways about. I went back and watched it again, and I was like, oh my God. It's so different now to watch it with like the stuff that we were thinking about, but it's confirmed, you know what I'm saying? So what we're gonna do is this. We are going to watch a clip. I'm going to make some commentary, that kind of a situation. The parts that stuck out to me, and so let's go ahead and begin.
We just want to thank everyone in the community for all the support we've seen. We've felt so helpless, and seeing everybody out here really looking and helping out really means a lot.
Just that right there is sickening. We feel so helpless. Thank you to everyone in the community, knowing full well like what they have done is shocking. But we're also going to be talking about some behavior stuff. Now, I always say this, you know, I ain't no behavior analysis, psychologist, doctor, lawyer, cop, journalist, any of that stuff. I just have my opinions. Their behavior is so suspect in this, which threw major red flags up to a lot of us when we watch this. So one thing I think is interesting, we'll talk about as we go, but this first thing, you already see Jacqueline swaying as hard as she can like a live oak and a thunderstorm. I mean, just going and back and forth. Him hugging himself as hard as he can. With all due reason, they're lying through their teeth.
So, tell us what happened the night the kids went missing.
Okay.
From our yard.
Okay.
This is so awkward. First of all, I can remember when this came out, my first thought was that thing that he does where he's like, okay, it's almost like they slipped, and the way, it was almost like we were seeing behind the scenes of them talking to one another about how they were going to tell their story, right? Because it was almost like, okay, here we go, we've rehearsed this. And then she's up there freaking out. Like, she is freaking out this whole time. She is so nervous. And she's just like, in our yard. I mean, it just all over the place. Like, he, I bet, was yelling at her after this, right? Like, you're going to get his call. Da-da-da-da-da. You know what I'm saying? Because she is so bizarre in this. But he just sounds annoyed with it. I'm just like, ugh, okay, here we go. And so now let's get into what he is saying took place.
It was cold. I was going to make a fire. There's a lot of wood in this area right here next to our house. I opened up the back gate. I'm throwing wood, bringing it inside the house. My wife's inside. She was actually wrapping gifts, so we thought it was a good idea that they got our youngest to go outside and play with chalk on the back patio. Do not let them go on the dirt in the backyard. We keep them close.
Another thing I think is interesting here, and looking at this, and I know that at the end of the day, this was like the pandemic was going on, all that type of stuff, but wasn't this very convenient for them to have the mask situation going on, and they wear these huge masks and all this type of stuff? I mean, come on, right? Like, this worked to their benefit. So there was that. Now, the other thing I think is interesting about this part is he starts recanting the story. It was cold. We were doing this. Da-da-da-da-da. You know, and at first glance, you could almost mistake it for, well, they probably told this so many times to the police officers and da-da-da. But again, there's this level of, like, annoyance. I don't even know if that's the right word coming from him, right? And then he's recanting this, but also looking at the little nuggets he leaves in there. This whole thing of, we don't ever let him play in the dirt. We keep him close. If I remember correctly, the way it was, and it was almost like lining up. That's why you couldn't see them, or they weren't seen on whatever camera it was, or whatever. That whole comment was so strange and so intentional, is I guess the word that I'm looking at, or looking for. So let's watch the next segment.
They was playing with chalk, and I came in the house. I saw them there. I went in the house. I came back out. I didn't see him now. I immediately went back in, asked my wife, did you see the boys? She said, no, they should be outside playing with chalk. I said, well, I didn't see them, so I came back outside and I started searching my backyard. I searched the whole thing. I realized that I left the gate open and I panicked.
Now, another thing is, watch this, or the clip we just watched, I should say. Notice how Jacqueline is, again, swaying. She picks up, and I'm gonna mention this throughout, because again, it was very weird to me in the beginning, and you know, it's like, oh, well, maybe she's self-soothing because of the children, whatever. But we know this is not true, right? She is completely frightened. I also think it's interesting with him. I don't know if he is trying to make it sound like he's upset by his voice wavering a little bit, if that's how he just talks, or what, right? But it comes off to me as almost he's like trying to sound upset. But I also think that they are probably absolutely like running on adrenaline right here. Because imagine this, now we know these children had not been around. It's been confirmed, right? What so many of us said. These kids, they weren't even at this house. I mean, they might have been at the house for a hot second, like when whatever took place. But more than likely, it's looking like they weren't ever living at this house, right? Doing any of the stuff that these parents are, I shouldn't even say that these two people are claiming, right? So every little thing that he's saying now, looking at it where it's like, it's a lie. They literally constructed the story. They set this entire thing up to be like, this is what we're going to do. Because they had to have known at some point, right, that this was going to blow up. That like somebody was going to come looking for it, the children. You know what I'm saying? On some level, something's going to happen. Somebody's going to be able to say, we're the kids, right? This was never going to last. And so it's interesting how he sets this up for well, I was getting the firewood, and then I came in, and then I did this, and I didn't see him, so I went back in, and she was wrapping gifts. And then I realized I left the gate open. You know, it's a flimsy story at best, right? What's interesting is it seemed to work for quite a little bit. I mean, what has this been, like over a year or so? So, I mean, there's that, right? But let's continue watching and commenting.
Came inside the house, searched the house, me and my wife. Once that hadn't pan out, I got in the van. I looked down the street, most directions. It was getting dark, getting cold, and I got in the van and I hit a bunch of corners. I went down this street. I turned my light on. I searched. I called their names. Talked to a gentleman on the street on the other side over there. He didn't see me. So then I came home and I told my wife we need to call the cops. It's getting dark and I need help. We gotta get going. So I called the cops. Cops came.
Okay, now this is one where I want us to pay close attention to what she was doing with as soon as he starts talking about the cops, she's and I cannot get my face, you can tell what I'm getting ready to say, I cannot get my mind off the fact that the mask takes up half of her face, right? I think that's very intentional, you know, 100%. It's such a huge mask for her face, and I mean that's being petty or whatever, but I just think that they definitely were trying to hide their identities as much as you possibly can with going on TV. So it's interesting that she's just like, yep, see, we did something good, we called the cops. And I mean, remember the videotape of him going around when all the neighbors' tape came out, all that kind of stuff, where you can see these actions that he's saying, but there's something that just doesn't seem, it never seemed right. It didn't seem like it clicked. And again, as this goes further, we'll see why it didn't.
First thing they did was tell us to stay in the house so they can get a hold of us. And they had us just sitting there, and we wanted to keep searching. But everybody came out in droves, and I wanted to thank you guys that night, but we couldn't go outside.
The cops told us the best are out here.
The best are out here searching.
I mean, I do believe to some degree that like when something like this would happen, where the cops would be like, y'all stay here. Number one, they don't want them destroying evidence. They want to see what's going on, that kind of stuff, right? Now they're whole thing about the cops told us the best route here, yada, yada. I mean, obviously they were, because these people already knew that they weren't going to find these children, right? So I think that's interesting. And again, I think it's interesting how much they want everyone to know that. Because again, when we see these cases pop off like this, everybody is always going to be suspect. We're looking at the parents, their behavior. It's just, it goes hand in hand with these type cases, right? We're looking to see all that kind of stuff. Obviously, their body language did not pass the vibe check. That's a whole other story. But nonetheless, it's interesting that they are very concerned about preserving that image. Even when they know they did something, that what they've done, probably more so at this point because they know they're guilty.
And we appreciate it, and nobody ever could tell, we could never talk to anybody, and that was the issue.
We just want to thank everybody.
We really want to
And,
thank you guys.
Please, if anybody has seen them, please call, let somebody know.
It call the cops, call California's the city police department. Call them and let them know what you've seen, if you see anything.
It's interesting how much they're falling all over one another about this, when in reality, or not really all over one another, but like the whole fact of, we want to thank y'all, thank y'all, thank y'all, thank y'all, da 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 da. They're really appealing to the public. This is very important to them to maintain this sense of innocence and, you know, to preserve this imagery of, like, you know, concerned parents.
Our boys, they are going to be rambunctious, okay? They are going to be here in this area, and I really would like to go into houses, but it's not because I want to invade people's privacy. I just want to know if make sure. That's it.
Now, this part really disgusts me on so many different levels, because even when it was fresh, it was such a weird thing to say. The boys are going to be rambunctious, as if to say, if you find them, please don't discard them because they're acting like two toddler boys. I mean, it's just blows my mind. But here's another thing I was thinking. Okay, so now, again, at this point, this recording, all that type of stuff, the bodies have not been found. And at this point where I'm recording this, I don't have any more intel into, like, do they think they're ever going to find the bodies or whatever. But I wonder if he was setting all this up with the rambunctious stuff. And again, later, take note how he mentions about them rough housing, things like this. If he was trying to come up with some kind of excuse if the bodies were found and had bruising on them, that kind of a thing. Now, I don't know at that point if that would even, like, what good that would do, right? I don't know if they had cooked some idea of, well, if they find them, we'll say this. And then, you know, almost in the context of, well, they did something that was an accident, so we knew that we were going to look guilty, so we hid them here. You know what I'm saying? Like, something like that. I try and make sense of why he would say they're rambunctious. But I also think it's like a slip in the way of maybe this is what set him off on some level, right? Of being like, oh my God. Because from what I've heard, and this is allegedly street, this is not confirmed, this is just through the grapevine and comment sections, all this, it doesn't sound like he was like really that great of a dude, right? Like he maybe had some anger issues, this kind of stuff, right? I mean, this is all starting to come to light now. So it makes me wonder if that was like a little slip of we're hearing what set him off.
Because I don't, go ahead, I'm sorry, if you got any questions.
Oh, no, you're good.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to say, you know, this is the first time we're hearing from you guys, and I can't imagine what you guys are going through. I can't even fathom it. For you guys, for people who are thinking that there's some kind of foul play involved, you know, we just spoke to the biological mother. She says she had a conversation with you guys, and that she thinks there's some kind of foul play involved, that she thinks you guys did something.
And that's understandable.
What's your response to that?
That's understandable. I would think the same thing.
Yep.
I mean, that's exactly the point. And if we can find our babies, then guess what? That's no. And that's all I want is to find our babies. That's it.
Now, I love the fact that the reporter asked the hard-hitting question, right? And it's just like, well, we talked to the Bayan mom, and she thinks y'all had something to do with it. Because remember, like, some of the family members were there and having, like, kind of a shouting match with them, right? And obviously, it turns out they had all very good reason to be doing this. So when he says that, and I think it's very interesting psychologically, and again, this is just from myself, I'm not a psychologist, but when they're like, yeah, understandable, we would think the same thing. It's like they're taking ownership of it, almost like this context, like, you know, if you take ownership of something of yourself, you take away the power from others to, like, make you feel bad about it or something like that. I don't know if that makes sense. Almost like they rehearse this. Like, look, you know, they're going to be expecting us. We're just going to own up to it, right? They say something like, yeah, we would think that too. We would think that too. You know what I mean? And it's like, and it's a good tactic to use, right? So also take note how the swaying picks up during this time. Literally, the absolute unspoken body language that is going on with these two, and now us knowing, like, okay, they 100% knew that these children were no longer with us at this point, makes it even more fascinating.
And I talked to her this morning, and I really wanted to tell her that I am completely sorry because we were entrusted with her children, and they came to us, and they became our children, and we named them, and they are our children, and so we want them back. So please, if y'all could get back on what you guys are doing, we should be able to get a hold of somebody, but they took all of our tech, so they wanted to, I guess, just rule us out, which makes sense as a part of the investigation.
Now, I also think it's very interesting how he slides that in of these are our babies. You know, they came into our trust, and, you know, he says all the right things, but it's also almost like this little bit of a dig, because remember, at this point, he knows that they're not coming back. So he's like, the fact that he's saying that and taking that dig at the Bayan mom is also just even more grimy. But then he's like, okay, everybody get back to work. You know, just like, I mean, they are so ready to be done with this, right? Like, we know for a fact, they're like, we are done with this press conference thing, right? So, and then he slides the thing in about the phone and that information. Oh, we should be able to get a hold of somebody. Again, it's like looking at this interview now where these bizarre things fall out of their mouths throughout the interview, where it's like, why did you say that? Like, why? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why is this coming out of your mouth now? Like, there's like no reason for it. Well, I mean, obviously we know. They are completely beside themselves with nerves and whatever goes on when you've taken the lives of innocent children and you're on TV trying to hide it.
So that's pretty much it.
Have you guys, you talked to the police all last night?
Yes.
So you guys willfully gave them your
Everything.
technology,
Yes.
the car.
Yes.
How did they get a search warrant? Did you
I
guys?
no
I don't
idea.
see why they got one, but they got one. We
Yeah,
would
they
have let them
didn't
take
need one,
anything.
but-
We would have let them take everything. We let them come in and search with us. We asked them to come do that.
What did they take?
Just tech. And that's it. Like our phones.
So this right here, 100%, this is what I think took place. Wherever and whatever happened to the children most likely wasn't maybe in this specific home. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that. This is just my little theory here. It seems to be like a crossover time or whatever. So whatever took place, it's like, I just feel like he is so cocky. He felt like, I have gotten rid of every bit of evidence, every bit of whatever to cover our tracks, right? To muddy the water, however you want to say it. To get on here and be like, and again, owning up to it. Yep, they got a search warrant. Don't know why they did it. They come on in. We asked them to come search. We asked them to come do this. Again, it's that like going over the top with something to make yourself look innocent. You know what I'm saying? And that's totally what they're doing here. You know, they took our tech, they took our phones, they took this and da-da-da. We have nothing to hide. The whole 9 yards. And again, we know they had something to hide, but I just think that they really thought they were that slick. Like they hid everything.
From the house, though. They,
Oh, well, I guess, should I answer that? Or?
answer it to us, yeah.
Okay. So, okay, and I guess, I don't even know.
I see. Yeah, we seriously felt like we needed to be out here. We did. Again, we were told the best are out here looking already. Just to stay put. They have more questions. There was literally a cop with us the whole time in there.
He had sitting down. We would ask, can we go help? They had to sit down.
Said nope.
He said, no, we got the best out there.
So
we
it's
need
not-
you guys here in case we have more questions.
I don't want you guys thinking we
don't.
didn't try. We actually
We
looked
tried.
before we called
We
the
looked,
police.
yes.
So this is in response to, you know, the accusations of not looking, this and that, why were you out here the night before, all this kind of stuff. And again, I mean, we obviously know why, you know, at this point, because they are guilty, right? I mean, innocent until proven guilty, but you know what I'm saying. They've been charged, right? So we know that much. But during that part, again, I just feel like the cops probably were just like in any situation like this, they're like, we don't want you out there. You know what I'm saying? Especially maybe a volatile situation. But I just think it's interesting how much like we looked the night before. We wanted to be out here. Look, we tried to stand up and walk out there. And they said the best are out there. I'm like, really? Do we really believe that? Mm-mm. You know, I don't think it went down just like that, but you know, something of that flavor. So that part isn't really standing to like I'm sitting here, I'm like, I can kind of see how the cops would not want them out there, but also because I think that they had so many red flags going off. I personally, if I was a cop, would be like, I don't want them out there because I don't want them to run, and I don't want them destroying evidence, and I don't want them to be killed by somebody else, so that we can find out what they did with these children.
And I imagine the mind-boggling part is the search for information. What happened? Where are they?
Yes.
Et cetera, et cetera.
And
and just so we are able to present the information correctly, at what time did you guys notice your kids went missing, and at what time were they reported missing to the police?
it's about, I think it was about 4:30, going on 5. It was getting dark, like I said. 5-ish. That's about it. That's when everything played out.
And then when did you guys call the police to report them missing?
After we searched
Yeah.
a little bit around here, it was dark, so we definitely we got worried.
Would you say it was maybe within an hour, a couple hours?
No, it was within minutes of us getting finished with our search.
Okay.
It was within minutes.
Okay, so now this part is intriguing to me because it's interesting how they don't really answer the question. The reporter keeps going and going, right? And again, with her, like, oh, after we searched, they speak in broken sentences almost, because I just think they're so full of angst. And, you know, not angst, but anxiety or whatever, angst. Probably that too, but you know what I'm saying? So they have that nervous thing going, all that type of stuff. And it's like 4:35, 5, you know, that time zone, and we call the cops, you know, that's when it played out. Oh, we call the cops after, okay, well, when? Well, after we searched. It's like they're not wanting to say that, and then they're finally pinned down to that. Well, minutes after we did our search. Yeah, but they're not really giving it feels like shady, right? Because it is shady. I mean, they did this all intentionally, right? This was completely set up. They literally were like, here we go, we're about to do this. This is the story we have cooked up. And then they did it, you know, and everything, we've seen it play out since then. It's just, it blows my mind to watch this.
What do you guys want people at home to understand about this situation? For them, you know, even speaking about what you guys are feeling is difficult. What do you want them at home to understand about this whole situation?
We're going through it. It's difficult. I mean, everybody's making their own their own conclusions. They don't know anything. We're not sure like everything. We're not sure. We said what we knew, and if anybody has seen them or anything, please call the police department.
Now, this is one of the most telling parts of this interview. I'm lying, I think all of it is, but this one is especially. When asked, like, what do you want people out there to know? All this, we're going through it. Literally spends the first few sentences in this all directed back itself. Our feelings about it, our thing. The first thing not out of their mouth is, please bring our children home. Please bring our children home. That should be the first thing out of their mouth, right? 100% concerned about their image, about appearing innocent. And then, as an afterthought, they know that no one's going to find the children, right? Or at least not alive at this point, right? And so it's like this afterthought. I think a lot of times when you see these scenarios where a person who has done something and they're lazy about helping search parties because they know, right? It's like, you know, they know they're not going to find them or whatever. And I just think that there's that woven in through this, because obviously at this point they know what they've done with the kids, whatever they've done. And so it's this afterthought. Their main thing in this is appearing innocent and almost like victims themselves.
A lot of people are speaking of this as, you know, after the math, past tense. I want to talk about your kids in present tense. What kind of boys are these? Tell us about the boys.
Very playful, very rambunctious, and they do love to wrestle. They do love to kind of get rough with each other.
Kids.
They're kids. Of course, they would love to go out, but so during the pandemic, we wasn't trying to go, you know, out here. And so we stayed inside.
Again, very interesting in the past tense. Let's talk about present tense. And then he rounds it back around to they roughhouse, they wrestle. He would have you think That they are two, what do you call that, MMA fighters? I mean, I just think he's dropping those little eggs to be found later. You know, there's a reason why he's saying that over and over through the interview, right? Now, the whole thing about the pandemic, oh, it's the pandemic. We weren't trying to go outside here, so we stayed inside. I mean, 100% covering tracks as to why nobody's seen anybody.
For a mother's intuition, I know you were saying, and we'll get your names after this, but you were saying how you feel like they're in this area. Do you feel the same way? And what is the intuition? What is the sense you get? What do you think happened to your boys? Do you think someone took them? Do you think they're lost? Do you think...
Yeah, definitely. I definitely know they're not walking around. They're not that kind. They do not just roam around. You know, these patches, they definitely, I think definitely would have been picked up or something.
That was my assumption.
Have they ever taken off every
No.
yard before?
No.
No.
They've never taken off
No.
before?
Now, that last part right there, where a mother's tuition, my God, I can't roll my eyes hard enough at it. She went along with it, too. Of course she did. But the fact of, I mean, looking at it where just this haphazard answer. And again, they're not the type to go roaming. Well, they're toddlers. Of course not. They're not going to stroll down to the damn neighbors and ask to borrow a cup of sugar. You know what I'm saying? We know this. You know, we're not stupid. They would have an innocent person in jail on death row over this to cover their butts. They would 100% throw a neighbor under the bus if they could. Probably out looking for it. You know what I'm saying? But 100%, another thing too, 100%, I love saying that in this video, I'm going to name the video 100%, is the children are nowhere near this home. They have continually drawn attention to they're here, they're not wandering around, they're here. I wish I could go look in neighbors' homes, all this kind of stuff. So, yeah. So that is what we're going to do, talk about the video. So let's just do some final thoughts on that. Okay, so before we get to the actual final thoughts, that kind of a thing, let's talk about their first court appearance, which took place, and just go over some of that. I'm going to be referencing some notes on my phone, and I'll put the link to the article for this down below, but it's pretty much what we could expect from a first court appearance in a situation like this. So they did plead not guilty to 2 counts of the second-degree M charges, 2 counts of willful cruelty, and falsely reporting an emergency. Now, of course, we expect this, right? Let's see what else this has to say. The judge ordered them held without bail. Thank God. They do not need to be anywhere near the street, y'all. We know this, right? We know this. Scheduled trial is for May 23rd, but given that defense counsel has only just been assigned, that date will likely be postponed. This is standard par of the course, right? Now they're just talking about, you know, Trezell standing there next to his court-appointed attorney, yada, yada, yada. Now, prosecutor Eric Smith asked that all offense reports be sealed and a gag order issued barring attorneys, investigators, and witnesses from publicly commenting on evidence. A motion on the gag order is scheduled for next week. Again, this is pretty standard stuff here, right? Then I'm going to put these pictures up here, but they're showing pictures of Jacqueline and her defense attorney here. And let's see what else you got. Firewood is just talking about a little story here. And there's that. They're talking about the story that they both said. Now, it said prosecutors said, however, information received a week later after what, you know, took place initially led the involvement of the Bakersfield Police Department. Now, we also saw this take place. So I think it's interesting. Information that they received a week after this happened. This is where it was like, something's going on here. So this will be very interesting to see how it all pans out in trial in the courtroom, for us to see what exactly was going on in that very beginning that made it to where they couldn't really arrest them, but they were on the radar. You know what I'm saying? Now, again, with their first hearing here, it's what we expect. It's, you know, they're pleading not guilty. Thank God they're being held without bail. I think they need to be put under the jail if found guilty, and never see the light of day again, right? It does make me nervous that it's California, because you know how their prisons are out there, where it's like so overcrowded all the time, and it's like you go in, you check in, and you leave type situation. However, these charges usually don't stand too well for people incarcerated. So there is that. Now, that being said, all the stuff that we have looked at today, I've kind of sprinkled my opinions on it. You already know how I feel about them. I felt like they were guilty then. I feel like they're guilty now. Those are just my opinions. I think that they are terrible human beings. I think that now that we see how absolutely calculated this was, and by that I mean, sure, there might be evidence that comes out to say, oh, well, this accidentally happened and then they did this premeditated, whatever. Calculated in the sense that the lengths that they went through to cover this up, right? Them pleading for help from the public and thanking them. I mean, this will go down there up with, what's the woman from South Carolina that drowned her children in the car? I mean, this, anytime I watch it, I see something else. And I'm just like, what? I just can't. What kind of monsters do this? And then also, I'm very curious to see who else is charged. You know, and are we going to find out that they victimized other people in the, you know, while committing these crimes, right? So it's a lot to take in. Again, my heart goes out, obviously, to the boys who are no longer with us, to the biological family, to the people that truly loved and cared for those boys. My heart goes out to them. I feel awful that they've had to see this happen. It's such a tragic event to see these kids go off to families that it just doesn't even make sense to me. I mean, why would you even want to take children in that you're going to end up doing this to them? It just makes me think that this was a business for them, you know, and they didn't really care about any of these kids, right? Because remember, they had other children that were taken away. Thank God, right? Okay. So all that being said, I want to know what you think. What are your opinions on the charges? What do you think possibly really happened? Do you think other people are involved? Do you think they got their other children involved in this? You know, what are your opinions? Let me know in the comment section. Show some love for Orrin and Orson and his bio family, the people that loved and cared for those two little baby boys. And I really appreciate everybody who makes this channel possible. It wouldn't be here without you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for keeping these cases alive and keeping the channel alive and going. I really, really appreciate it. And until we meet around the sofa next time, I'll see you back there.